The massive research vessel Harmony hummed with nervous energy. Its metal halls echoed with whispers and the soft beeping of advanced technology. Dr. J. Park stood in the main communication chamber, her fingers tightly gripping a datapad. She was looking at her new partner, Jai Wan, who seemed completely unaware of the importance of their upcoming mission. Jai Wan was not what anyone would call a typical space communication specialist. He was tall and slightly awkward, with a nervous habit of adjusting his uniform every few minutes. His eyes darted around the room, taking in every small detail, while his fingers drummed an uneven rhythm on his leg. Most of his colleagues found him irritating, but Jay had seen something different in him. A kind of unpredictable energy that might just be useful. Today was not just another day. The Harmony was about to make first contact with the Krelax, an alien species known across the galaxy for their extremely precise and efficient communication. They were tall, almost metallic in appearance, with sharp angles and movements that looked more like computer calculations than natural motion. Remember, Dr. Park warned Gaiwan, these aliens do not understand small talk. Every word must have a purpose. Do not waste their time with unnecessary conversation. Jaiwan nodded, but there was a slight smile playing on his lips. It was the smile of someone who was about to do exactly the opposite of what he was told. The communication chamber fell silent as the Krelax diplomatic team entered. They moved like perfectly synchronized machines, each step calculated, each movement precise. Their leader, a towering figure named Selkrit, approached the human delegation with eyes that seemed to scan and analyze every tiny detail. "Greetings," Selkrit said in perfect, emotionless English. "We are here to establish preliminary communication protocols." Most human specialists would have responded with an equally formal greeting, but Gaiwan was not most specialists. "Oh wow," he blurted out. "It's really cold in here, isn't it? I mean, space is cold, but this room feels extra chilly. Do you guys control the temperature differently? Back home, my aunt always complains about the air conditioning. She says it gives her a stiff neck." Dr. Park closed her eyes in horror. This was not how first contact was supposed to happen. The Krelax leader paused. Its eyes, if they could be called eyes, flickered with what might have been confusion. Selkrit looked at Gaiwan, then at Dr. Park, then back at Gaiwan. "Temperature regulation is irrelevant to our communication objectives," the alien responded after a moment of apparent calculation. But Gaiwan was not done. Right. But doesn't small talk help build connections? I mean, even machines need a warm-up period, right? Speaking of warm, I had this amazing spicy chicken dish last week. Have you ever tried Korean food? Dr. Park wanted to disappear. The other human specialists looked like they were about to spontaneously combust from embarrassment. The Krelax delegation stood perfectly still, processing this unexpected stream of information. What none of them realized was that Gaiwan's seemingly nonsensical chatter was about to change everything. His random words, his inability to follow standard communication protocols, were creating something extraordinary. A linguistic pattern that would soon become humanity's most unexpected weapon. As Gaiwan continued to talk about chicken, weather, and his aunt's neck problems, the first seeds of an incredible adventure were being planted. The universe was about to learn that human communication was anything but predictable. 3 days had passed since the first meeting with the Krelax, and tensions were rising aboard the Harmony. Dr. J. Park sat in the research lab, surrounded by screens filled with communication logs and data streams. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep, and a half-empty coffee cup sat forgotten next to her keyboard. Jaiwan, meanwhile, seemed completely untroubled. He walked into the lab with a sandwich in one hand and a tablet in the other, munching happily and leaving crumbs everywhere. Dr. Park looked up, ready to lecture him about maintaining a clean research environment. "Do you have any idea how much trouble you've caused?" she asked, her voice a mix of frustration and something else, something that sounded almost like curiosity. Jaiwan shrugged. Just having a conversation, he replied, taking another big bite of his sandwich. But something strange was happening in the communication logs. The Krulak's transmission patterns were changing, subtly at first, then more dramatically. Where their previous communications had been razor-sharp and perfectly structured, now there were tiny imperfections. Gaps, moments of what almost seemed like hesitation. Dr. Park zoomed in on the data. "This doesn't make sense," she muttered. The ship's senior communication specialist, a stern man named Park Sung-ho, burst into the lab. "We need to talk about your behavior during the alien meeting," he said, pointing directly at Gaiwan. "Which part?" Jaiwan asked innocently, brushing sandwich crumbs off his uniform. "The part about the weather, or the part about my aunt's chicken recipe?" Sung-ho was not amused. "You broke every single first contact protocol. These are advanced alien beings, not your drinking buddies." But Dr. Park was no longer listening. Her fingers were flying across the keyboard, pulling up more and more communication logs. Something was definitely wrong, or perhaps something was definitely right. "Look at this," she said, turning her screen to show the others. The Krulak's communication network was showing signs of what could only be described as linguistic interference. It was as if Gaiwan's constant stream of random conversation had created a kind of verbal noise that was disrupting their precise communication channels. "I don't understand," Sung-ho said. "How could random talking cause this?" Jaiwan smiled. "Sometimes," he said, "talking is more than just talking." The ship's artificial intelligence, an advanced system called ARIA, began to process the new data. Streams of information flowed across additional screens. Complex algorithms tried to make sense of the strange communication patterns. "Analyzing," ARIA's smooth voice announced. "Detecting anomalies in alien communication protocols." Dr. Park leaned closer to the screen. The communication logs were revealing something extraordinary. Jaiwan's seemingly meaningless chatter had created a complex linguistic interference pattern. It was like he had accidentally discovered a way to peek behind the Krulak's communication firewall. "This is impossible," Sung-ho whispered. But Dr. Park knew something important was happening. Jaiwan's ability to talk endlessly about nothing might have just become the most important skill in human space exploration history. "We need to run more tests," she said, her voice filled with excitement. "And Gaiwan," she added, turning to the man who was now finishing his sandwich, "you are not to stop talking. Not for any reason." Jaiwan grinned and opened his mouth. Everyone in the room knew exactly what was coming. An endless stream of conversation that might just save humanity. The research lab on the Harmony looked like a battlefield of technology. Screens covered every wall, blinking with streams of data that seemed to pulse with an almost living energy. Dr. Judd Park had not slept in days. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and her eyes were wide with a mixture of exhaustion and excitement. Jaiwan sat in the corner, talking. He was always talking. "Did you know my grandmother used to make the best kimchi?" he said to no one in particular. "She had this special jar that was older than me, probably older than this spaceship actually." Most people would have ignored him. But not today. Today, every single word was being tracked, analyzed, and processed by the ship's artificial intelligence. Araya, the ship's AI, began to speak. Linguistic analysis complete. Detecting unprecedented communication patterns. Dr. Park leaned forward. The screens in front of her showed something incredible. The Krulak's communication network was not just disrupted. It was slowly being decoded. Each random story from Gaiwan, each meaningless conversation about weather or food, was creating complex mathematical patterns that were breaking through the aliens' most sophisticated encryption. "This is impossible," muttered Park Sung-ho, who had been watching the analysis for hours. But it was happening. The more Gaiwan talked, the more the alien communication systems seemed to unravel. It was as if his ability to speak without a clear purpose was a weapon more powerful than any laser or shield. Jaiwan continued, oblivious to the importance of what was happening. My uncle once got lost for 3 days in a mountain. Can you believe that? He said he survived on nothing but some dried fish and his own determination. Araya's voice cut through his story. Decryption progress, 37.6% and increasing. Dr. Park couldn't believe her eyes. The alien communication network was revealing its secrets, layer by layer, all because of an endless stream of random conversation. Mathematical algorithms were forming from the most unexpected source, human small talk. We need to understand how this is happening, Dr. Park said, her voice a mix of scientific curiosity and disbelief. The research team worked quickly. They began to map out the communication interference, tracking how Jai Wan's conversations created unique linguistic patterns. It was like solving a massive, complex puzzle where the pieces kept changing shape. Suddenly, Araya's voice changed. Warning: significant data breakthrough detected. The screens filled with a flood of alien communication logs. Encrypted messages that had been impenetrable moments ago were now becoming clear, and what they revealed was shocking. The Krellaks were not just a diplomatic mission. They were scouts, preparation teams for something much larger and more dangerous. They're mapping invasion routes, Dr. Park whispered. Her hand covered her mouth in shock. The alien species had been systematically identifying potential targets across multiple star systems. Their goal was simple and terrifying: neutralize emerging spacefaring civilizations before they could become a threat. And humanity was high on their list. Jai Wan, still talking about his uncle's mountain adventure, had no idea he had just discovered a plan that could potentially destroy human civilization. More kimchi? He asked, pulling out a container from his bag. I always carry some. You never know when you might need a snack in space. The research team stared at him. Park Sung-ho looked like he might faint. Dr. Jeb Park's mind was racing with the implications of what they had just discovered. Humanity's first line of defense against a galactic threat was a man who couldn't stop talking about food, family stories, and random memories. The universe, it seemed, had a strange sense of humor. The conference room on the Harmony was silent. Too silent. Dr. Jed Park stood at the head of the table, her hands shaking slightly as she pulled up the decoded alien communications. Around her, the top leaders of Earth's Interstellar Defense Council stared in disbelief. Jai Wan sat in the corner, munching on a bag of chips. Crumbs scattered across the expensive conference table. This cannot be real, said Admiral Kim, his weathered face looking like it was carved from stone. Are you telling me we discovered an alien invasion plan because of small talk? Dr. Park took a deep breath. Not just small talk, she explained. Jai Wan's specific communication style created a unique linguistic decryption method. The Krellaks communication network is built on extremely precise algorithms. Our random conversation patterns completely broke their system. The decoded messages were terrifying. The Krellaks had been tracking potential spacefaring civilizations for centuries. Their goal was simple and brutal: eliminate any species before they could become a potential threat to the alien empire. Humanity was next on their list. The invasion plan was detailed, precise, cold. The Krellaks had mapped out every single human colony, every space station, every potential point of resistance. They planned to neutralize human civilization within one solar cycle, which translated to approximately 3 Earth years. How many planets are targeted? Asked Commander Park Sung-ho, his voice barely a whisper. Dr. Judd Park pulled up another screen. 17 human colonies were marked for complete destruction. Billions of lives were at stake. Jai Wan, still eating his chips, spoke up. You know, he said casually, this reminds me of a story my grandmother told me about her village during the war. Nobody thought they would survive, but they did. Everyone turned to look at him. Jai Wan seemed completely unaware of the tension in the room. The chips are getting stale, he added, shaking the bag. Admiral Kim looked like he might explode. This is a serious meeting about potential human extinction, and he's talking about chips. But Dr. Park was watching the screens. Something was happening. Even now, Jaiwan's random comments were creating small disruptions in the communication logs that continued to stream in the background. "We need a plan," she said firmly. The Defense Council looked lost. Traditional military strategies would not work against an enemy that could be disrupted by random conversation. The Krellaks were too advanced, too precise. "We can't fight them with normal weapons," Dr. Park continued. "But we might be able to fight them with communication." Jaiwan looked up. "More chips?" he asked, offering the bag around the room. Nobody answered. The plan was forming in Dr. Park's mind. If random human conversation could break the Krellaks' communication network, then maybe, just maybe, they could use this as a weapon. "We need to assemble a team," she said. "A team of people who can talk. Really talk. People who can create linguistic chaos." Admiral Kim looked shocked. "You want to fight an advanced alien civilization with chatty people?" Dr. Park nodded. "Exactly." Jaiwan grinned and opened another bag of chips. "I know some really good talkers," he said. "The fate of humanity might just depend on people who could never shut up." The Interstellar Defense Council building looked like a giant glass beehive. Thousands of people moved through its halls, each believing they were doing something important. Dr. J. Park stood in the main presentation room, her hands gripping a digital projector that showed the decoded alien plans. Nobody was listening. "This is impossible," said Director Helen Roberts, her fingers tapping an impatient rhythm on the conference table. "You're telling me we discovered an alien invasion plan through random conversation?" Jaiwan, who had been invited to the meeting, chose that moment to speak. "My aunt makes the best random conversation," he said. "She once talked to a plumber for 3 hours about her garden. Nobody knew how they started talking about pipes and ended up discussing tomato growing techniques." The room fell silent. Then uncomfortable laughter broke out. Dr. Park felt her patience wearing thin. "This is not a joke," she said firmly. "The Krellaks have mapped out invasion routes for our colonies. 17 human settlements are at direct risk of complete elimination." The senior officials exchanged looks. These were people who had spent decades in bureaucratic positions. They were trained to doubt, to question, to delay. Actual proof of an alien threat was something they were not prepared to handle. "Show us the evidence," demanded Admiral Chen, his thick glasses sliding down his nose. Dr. Park pulled up the communication logs. Complex streams of data filled the screens. Mathematical patterns danced between alien encryption and the seemingly random words Jaiwan had spoken during their first contact. Jaiwan, meanwhile, had found a plate of sandwiches at the side of the room. He began eating, leaving small crumbs everywhere. "Do you understand what you're seeing?" Dr. Park asked the council members. Blank stares met her question. The ship's artificial intelligence, ARI, began to speak. Its voice was calm and precise. "Communication interference patterns show 99.7% probability of alien invasion strategy." More uncomfortable silence. "We need more time to verify," said Director Roberts. "This cannot be rushed." Dr. Park wanted to scream. Time was the one thing they did not have. The Krellaks invasion was planned within 3 Earth years. Every moment of delay reduced their chances of survival. Jaiwan finished his sandwich and looked around. "Anyone want the last bite?" he asked. Nobody answered. "The communication disruption method is unique," Dr. Park explained again. "Jaiwan's ability to talk randomly creates mathematical patterns that break the Krellaks' encryption. We can use this as a defensive strategy." Admiral Chen adjusted his glasses. "And how exactly do we turn random talking into a weapon?" "By creating a special communication team," Dr. Park said. "People who can talk endlessly. People who can create linguistic chaos." The bureaucrats looked confused. This was not how they were used to solving problems. They wanted reports, data analysis, complex military strategies. What they got was a man who could talk about anything and everything. Jaiwan picked up another sandwich. I once knew a guy who could talk for hours about different types of bread, he said. Did you know there are over 100 types of bread in Korea alone? The council members stared at him. Dr. Park knew they were close to a breakthrough, or a complete breakdown. We need to act, she said firmly, or we risk everything. Jaiwan nodded and took another bite of his sandwich. The fate of humanity might just depend on his ability to never stop talking. The training facility looked like something between a military base and a weird talk show set. Rows of chairs faced large communication screens. Weird posters about conversation techniques covered the walls. In the center of the room stood Dr. J. Park, looking both excited and slightly worried. Welcome to the Linguistic Disruption Unit, she announced to a group of 20 carefully selected individuals. These were not typical soldiers. They were people who could talk forever, people who could turn conversation into a weapon. Some were radio hosts, some were sales representatives, some were just people who never knew when to stop talking. Jaiwan stood at the front of the room, looking completely relaxed. Your mission, Dr. Park explained, is to learn how to create communication patterns that can break alien encryption. A woman in the front row raised her hand. How exactly do we do that? Jaiwan stepped forward. By talking, he said simply. Just talking. The training was unlike anything anyone had ever seen before. They practiced random conversation techniques. They learned how to create linguistic interference. They studied the mathematical patterns that emerged from seemingly meaningless chatter. Tell me about your morning, one instructor would say. Well, a trainee might respond, I woke up and my cat was sitting on my kitchen counter. She loves to knock things over. Last week, she broke my grandmother's favorite coffee mug. It was blue, the same blue as the sky outside my window. Speaking of windows, did you know? The instructors would carefully track the conversation, measuring how many random topics could be introduced in a single breath. Araya, the ship's artificial intelligence, Monet. The meeting room was silent when the Krulax delegation entered. Humans sat on one side, aliens on the other. In the center stood Jaiwan, looking completely relaxed and holding a bag of chips. Dr. J. Park watched carefully. This was the moment everything would change. Zelkrit, the Krulax leader, moved with perfect precision. Its metallic body seemed to calculate every single movement. We are here, the alien said, to discuss interstellar relations. Jaiwan opened his bag of chips. The crinkling sound broke the serious atmosphere. Oh, he said, would you like some chips? My grandmother used to make the best snacks. One time, she made these amazing rice cakes during a family reunion. It was so hot that day. Speaking of hot, have you ever been to a Korean summer? The humidity is crazy. The Krulax delegation froze. Their communication systems were already picking up the random word patterns. Mathematical algorithms began to struggle with the unexpected linguistic input. Zelkrit's eyes, if they could be called eyes, flickered with confusion. Chips are irrelevant to diplomatic discussions, the alien responded. But Jaiwan was just getting started. Irrelevant? He asked. Nothing is irrelevant. Did you know chips were invented by accident? A chef was trying to make something else and boom, chips happened. Life is funny that way. Like my uncle's dog. Strangest animal you'd ever meet. Dr. Park watched the communication screens. Something was happening. The Krulax communication network was starting to show tiny disruptions. Little breaks in their perfect, precise language. More team members from the Linguistic Disruption Unit joined in. A woman started talking about her grandmother's knitting. A man described his morning commute in painful, unnecessary detail. Another person discussed the history of gardening in suburban America. The Krulax looked lost. Their communication systems were designed for pure, efficient information transfer. They had no defense against pure, random human conversation. We have come to discuss potential conflict, Zelkrit said, trying to regain control. Jaiwan took another chip. Conflict is such a heavy word, he said. You know what helps solve conflict? food, and talking. Lots of talking. The alien delegation began to show signs of communication breakdown. Their precise movements became slightly less synchronized. Their language patterns started to fragment. Dr. Park knew they were winning. "Did you know," another team member suddenly said, "that my cat has 3 different meow sounds? One for food, one for attention, and one that just sounds like complaining." The Krulax looked completely confused. Decrypted tried to speak, but its communication systems were struggling. Random human words were creating mathematical interference that their advanced technology could not process. Jaiwan offered the chip bag again. "More?" he asked. The diplomatic meeting was unlike anything in human history. It was not a battle of weapons or technology. It was a battle of conversation, of pure, unfiltered human ability to talk about absolutely nothing and everything at the same time. And humanity was winning. Dr. Park allowed herself a small smile. Who would have thought that the key to saving the human race was the ability to never, ever stop talking? The communication room on the Harmony looked like a battlefield of words. Screens buzzed with alien communication patterns that were slowly falling apart. Dr. Park watched in amazement as the Krulax communication network began to crumble. It started slowly, small breaks in their perfect language, tiny moments of confusion that grew larger and larger. Jaiwan sat in the center of everything, still talking. "The weird thing about my uncle's garden," he was saying, "is that he grows the strangest vegetables. Last summer, he grew a pumpkin so big it didn't fit in his truck. Can you imagine? A pumpkin larger than a truck." The ship's artificial intelligence, ARIA, tracked every single word. Mathematical patterns showed how human conversation was destroying the most advanced communication system in the galaxy. The Krulax delegation had been in the meeting room for hours, but it was not a normal meeting. It was a battle of words, a war fought entirely through conversation. "Our communication protocols are superior," Selkrit had said earlier, but now the alien leader looked less certain. More members of the Linguistic Disruption Unit joined the conversation. They talked about everything and nothing. A woman described her cat's morning routine. A man explained the complex history of sandwich making in his family. Another person talked about collecting unusual socks. The Krulax communication network began to fail. Their perfect, precise language could not handle the random, unpredictable nature of human conversation. Every word was a weapon. Every story a potential system breach. Dr. Park watched the screens carefully. The alien invasion plans were becoming less and less clear. Their communication systems were breaking down under the weight of pure, unfiltered human small talk. "We have trained for this," she told the team. "Keep talking." Jaiwan grinned and opened another bag of chips. "Who wants to hear about my grandmother's cooking?" he asked. The room erupted in conversation. Aroya's voice cut through the noise. "Alien communication network experiencing critical failure," the AI announced. "Invasion plans becoming unstable." Selkrit tried to speak, but its words came out jumbled. The precise alien language was falling apart. Mathematical patterns that had been perfect for centuries were now completely broken. "This is impossible," the alien leader said. But it was happening. Humanity had found its most unexpected weapon. Not a laser, not a shield, just the ability to talk endlessly about absolutely nothing. The Krulax communication systems continued to fail. Their invasion plans became less and less clear. What had been a perfect, precise plan was now a mess of broken language and confused signals. Dr. Park allowed herself a small smile. Jaiwan continued talking about his uncle's garden, about his grandmother's cooking, about the strange socks his friend collected. And with every word, humanity was winning. The invasion that had been planned for years was falling apart, not through military might, not through advanced technology, but through the pure, unstoppable power of human conversation. "More chips?" Jaiwan asked, offering the bag around the room. The universe would never be the same again. 1 week after the diplomatic disaster, the Krelak ship hung in space like a giant metal ghost. Its communication systems were completely broken. Its invasion plans were in ruins. Dr. Jai Park sat in the main conference room of the Harmony *. Jaiwan was beside her, eating chips and looking completely relaxed. "We did it," she said quietly. The Krelak's leadership had been completely defeated. Not by weapons, not by advanced technology, but by the most human of abilities, talking about absolutely nothing. Zelkrit, the alien leader, sat at the far end of the table. Its metallic body seemed less precise now, less perfect. The alien looked confused and defeated. "How?" Zelkrit asked. "How did your communication destroy our systems?" Jaiwan shrugged and offered the alien a chip. "Just talking," he said simply. The entire human team from the Linguistic Disruption Unit was present. They looked proud. They had saved humanity through the power of conversation. Araya, the ship's artificial intelligence, began to explain. "Human communication is nonlinear," the AI said. "Your species creates meaning through randomness. Our communication systems cannot process such unpredictability." The Krelak's delegation looked shocked. Dr. Park understood now what had happened. Humans had discovered something unique, a way of communicating that was completely different from any other species in the galaxy. Their ability to talk about nothing was actually their greatest strength. "We are not a threat," Dr. Park explained to the aliens. "We are simply different." Jaiwan nodded and took another chip. "Want to hear about my uncle's garden?" he asked. The room fell silent. The Krelaks had come to destroy humanity. Instead, they had discovered something they could not understand. A species that could turn conversation into a weapon. A species that could break the most advanced communication systems simply by talking. "Our invasion plans are no longer valid," Zelkrit said finally. Dr. Park smiled. Humanity had won, not through violence, not through technology, but through the pure, beautiful messiness of human communication. Jaiwan looked around the room. "Anyone want more chips?" he asked. The alien delegation looked confused, but they were listening. Outside the ship's windows, space stretched endlessly. Stars twinkled, galaxies spun, and humanity had just proven that they were something special. The Linguistic Disruption Unit had become legendary. Their method of fighting was completely unique. They had saved not just Earth, but potentially countless other civilizations that might have been targeted by the Krelaks. "We need to document this," Dr. Park said to Araya. The AI began recording. Every random story, every meaningless conversation, every strange tale about gardens and socks and family reunions. Jaiwan continued talking. The universe listened. Humanity had found its voice, and that voice was loud, random, and completely unstoppable.